You're a failure, Dad. That sentence wasn't just a stab in the heart. A knife wound can be stitched up, but those words were like a bucket of boiling water thrown directly in my face, searing both my skin and my dignity. I looked up. Standing before me was Michael, my only son. I had raised him with every spoonful of plain oatmeal and every spare cent I earned selling clay pots at the local market. He stood there, his back blocking the weak evening light coming through the door frame, his hand gripping the handle of a bright red plastic suitcase. "What did you say?" My voice was raspy, my hand still kneading a block of wet clay. Michael curled his lips, that look of contempt he had learned from the deadbeats on the corner. He looked at my hands, rough hands with nails black from the earth and thick calluses stacked like the bark of an old tree. "I said you're a failure." He spat out, every word clear and sharp. "Look at this house. Look at yourself. You're 60 years old, and you're still stuck in this miserable pottery shop smelling like mud all the time. How long do you plan to live like this until you die?" I stayed silent. There was a bitter knot in my throat. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to slap him, but my limbs were paralyzed. The cruel truth often leaves people speechless instead of angry. "I've earned an honest living, Michael." I tried to stay calm, leaning down to keep kneading the earth. "This dirt fed you and watched you grow." "Honest." Michael let out a loud laugh, a laugh that echoed through the empty house, hurting my ears. "Honest but poor is the same as being trash old man. I'm sick of eating beans every single day. I'm sick of this damp smell. I'm moving to the States." "The States?" I stopped my hands. "You don't have papers. You don't have a trade. What are you going to do there?" "Change my life." His eyes shone with a delusional ambition. "Up north they pay in dollars. 1 hour of work there is worth a whole month of you breaking your back here. I'm going to be rich, do you hear me? I am never coming back to this hole again." With that, he turned around and dragged his suitcase. The sound of the wheels screeching on the uneven concrete floor sounded like breaking bones. At the door, he stopped. Maybe he felt he hadn't hurt me enough. Maybe he wanted to leave one last mark to make sure I'd never forget his contempt. He saw the bucket of murky water for washing hands by the entrance. He kicked it. Splash. The bucket flipped over. The black muddy water splashed everywhere. It hit the peeling paint on the wall. It hit my pants, and it hit me directly in the face. The cold, stinking water ran down my cheeks, tasting salty at the corners of my mouth. I sat there petrified, the muddy water dripping from my chin onto the half-finished clay. Michael looked at me with a cold stare with no trace of love left. "Rot in your mud, old man." The iron door slammed shut. Boom! That noise ended everything. The end of a father's love. The end of hope. I didn't wipe my face. I sat there in the dark, tasting the mud on my lips. It was salty. Salty like tears, but also salty like sweat. My neighbor Emily heard the noise and poked her head through the window. "Mr. David, what happened? Did Michael leave already?" I didn't answer her. I looked at my own hands. The hands my son called failures. I squeezed the lump of clay in my hand, squeezing so hard that the small stones cut my skin until I bled. "Failure," I whispered to the darkness. "Does the stinking mud disgust you, son fine? Let me show you. From this pile of mud, I will build things you won't even be able to touch in your dreams. You want money, I'm going to show you how much money made from dirt weighs." That night I didn't sleep. My anger turned into a cold flame burning my insides, but clearing my mind more than ever. I swore before God. And I swore before the very demon waking up inside me. The day Michael returns, he won't see an old father making pots. He will see an empire. Before we continue, please subscribe to William's Revenge Stories and tell us where you are listening from in the comments below. 10 years passed as fast as a blink, but also as slow as the firing process of high-end ceramics. You ask how an old man abandoned by his son became a mogul. The answer is simple. Hunger. Not hunger for food, but hunger for revenge. After Michael left, I became like a mad beast. I worked 20 hours a day. I sold every piece of furniture in the house. I only kept a broken mattress to sleep next to the kiln. I stopped making those cheap 50-cent pots. I started researching the traditional glazed pottery formula of my family again, something my father had taught me, but I had ignored because it was too difficult. Fine pottery is not for the lazy. It demands an exact temperature, a meticulous clay mix, and most importantly, the cobalt blue must be as deep as the bottom of the ocean. The first batch cracked. I broke it. The 10th batch. The glaze was dull. I smashed it with a hammer. The 50th batch. It still wasn't perfect. The neighbors said I was crazy. Old David lost his mind. All day long you can hear him breaking plates. They didn't understand. I wasn't breaking plates. I was breaking mediocrity. Every broken piece of ceramic was a time I killed the old failure inside of me. In the second year, the opportunity came. I took a single vase to a high-end market in the city. I didn't put it on the ground like it was vegetables. I placed it on a small wooden pedestal covered with red velvet cloth. The vase was 2 feet tall, milky white glaze with blue dragons winding around it. A wealthy man passed by. He was wearing sunglasses, a white linen suit, and shiny leather shoes. He stopped. He took off his glasses. He touched the cold surface of the glaze. He tapped the rim of the vase. Ting! A crystal-clear sound echoing like a temple bell. "Magnificent," he exclaimed. "How much—" I looked at him. I remembered Michael. I remembered the phrase, "You're a failure." $5,000. I shouted a crazy price. A price that could buy an entire stall in that market. The street vendors laughed. "A crazy old man. No one is going to give you $5,000. But the man didn't laugh. He looked deep into my eyes. He saw the pride and the madness in them. He pulled out his wallet. He counted exactly 50 $100 bills. The moment I had that stack of money in my hand, I didn't feel joy. I only felt vengeful satisfaction. "Money isn't found on the street, son," I muttered in my mind, sending a message to my invisible son. "Money has to be fired in the flame." With those $5,000, I bought an industrial kiln. I hired artisans. I expanded the shop. By the 5th year, David's Pottery became the brand Imperial Ceramics. By the 8th year, I exported my first container to Dubai. By the 10th year, I became Mr. David. Am I no longer stained with mud? Wrong. I am still stained, but the mud on my hands now is gold. I stood in front of the mirror in the director's office. A 70-year-old man, white hair, skin, wrinkled like a dry raisin, but with eyes sharp as razors. I wore a simple shirt and my old shoes. I don't like wearing suits. Suits make me forget who I am. I looked out the tempered glass window. Below, the 5-acre complex was working at full speed. More than 300 workers. The sound of roaring machines, forklifts going back and forth. All of that is mine, belonging to this failure. But there is one thing I've never changed. Right in the corner of this luxury office, I put an old dented bucket and a handful of dry dirt, so that every day when I look at it, I remember the salty taste of the mud that splashed on my face that day. "Boss?" The secretary's voice sounded over the intercom. "Detective Miller is waiting for you." My heart skipped a beat. Miller? He was the only one I hired to track news about my son's American dream. "Send him in," I said coldly, but my hand was subconsciously gripping the edge of the desk. Miller walked in. He was a heavy-set man. He smelled like cheap tobacco and sour sweat. A total hack detective, but efficient. He carried a felt hat under his arm and a thick yellow envelope in the other hand. "Good afternoon, Mr. David." He bowed. His eyes quickly darted toward the box of expensive cigars on my table. "Sit down," I gestured with my chin, "and talk fast." "What is he doing? Is he a bank manager or the owner of a 5-star restaurant chain?" I asked sarcastically, but deep down a small, stupid part of the father still had hope. What if he really succeeded? What if he was right and I was wrong? Miller hesitated. He wiped the sweat from his forehead with a crumpled handkerchief. Well, not exactly, sir. It's best if you see the photos yourself." He pushed the envelope toward me. I pulled out the stack of photos. The first one froze me. There was no suit. There was no convertible car. In the photo was a thin, emaciated man, looking much older than his 32 years. Messy hair, neglected beard. He was sitting on a sidewalk in a border town, that city full of crime and vice. In his hand was a half-eaten piece of bread. The second photo. He was washing dishes in a greasy taco shop. He wore a black apron covered in grease. His face was dirty. His eyes were empty. The third photo. A huge guy full of tattoos had him by the collar of his shirt pinned against the wall. Michael was cowering with an expression of absolute terror, the fear of a sewer rat playing with a cat. "What is this?" I asked, my voice trembling with restraint. "He was deported 3 months ago, sir," Miller reported. "He crossed illegally. He got caught. He spent 6 months in jail, and then they kicked him back to the border. The American dream fell apart. And this tattooed guy? A loan shark. Young Michael owes money to local sharks and smugglers, totaling about $3,000. They threatened to cut his hands off if he doesn't pay this week." I leaned back in the chair and closed my eyes. $3,000. That amount is what a medium vase in my warehouse is worth. My son, the one who looked down on me for being poor, is now about to lose his hands for that miserable amount. Wow. I sighed. Pain crept into my heart, but it was immediately crushed by logic. No pity. Having pity now is killing him. He needs a lesson that 10 years of wandering abroad didn't teach him. I opened my eyes and stared at Miller. "Pay the debt." Miller nodded quickly. "Yes, I'll send the money right away and tell the young man his father is sending it." "No." I slammed my hand on the table. "Are you crazy? Don't say I sent it. Don't tell him I'm rich." I stood up and paced back and forth in the room. A cruel and crazy plan began to form in my head. I looked down at the pottery shop below. I need an heir, yes, but I don't need a coward. I need to fire this son again like you fire a defective block of clay. Listen closely, Miller. Pay his debt in the name of a charity or whatever. Then tell him you know a place where there's work here in this shop. You mean bringing the young boss in as a manager? Manager, my foot, I growled. Bring him in as a loader, a stacker. Let him enter through the back door, and absolutely no one must open their mouth to tell him I'm the owner of Imperial Ceramics. To him, I'm still just David, the old poor miserable employee. Understood? Miller swallowed hard and nodded frantically. Understood, boss. I looked at the photo of my ruined son again. You look down on me as a failure, right, Michael? You look down on me for being dirty. Fine. This time I'm going to give you a taste of real mud. Come back home, son. 3 days later, I took off my clean clothes and put on an old work suit stained with paint and clay. I smeared some coal dust on my face and messed up my white hair. I looked in the mirror. Perfect. I was still the miserable old David from 10 years ago. I waited in the loading area, the dirtiest place in the shop, located at the back, far from the luxury offices. A truck loaded with dirt stopped. Miller got down and gave a signal. From the back of the truck, a figure climbed down, staggering. It was Michael. Seeing him in person was even more pathetic than in the photos. Thin as an attic skin burned by the border sun, wearing a baggy t-shirt and jeans full of holes. He carried a black plastic bag, probably all the assets he had left from the American dream. He looked around. He saw the mountain of clay piled up. He saw the workers shoveling dirt in the middle of the dust. He wrinkled his nose. Disgust was clearly written on his face. "Still this damn smell," he muttered. I stepped out from behind the sacks. My heart was pounding. I wanted to run and hug him, but I held back. I was playing my role. "Michael," I called out, faking a weak, trembling voice. He turned around. His gaze met mine. There were no tears. There was no regret. He looked at me from head to toe, scanning my dirty clothes, and then he smiled with contempt. The bitter smile of one failure meeting another failure. "Hey, Dad," he said dryly, "you look just as screwed as before." That sentence confirmed everything. He hadn't changed. He was still the same jerk as always. The compassion in me died out. "Life is hard, son. I lowered my head, playing the powerless father. Luckily, the boss here took pity and let me be the head of the loaders. At least it's enough to eat every day. Head of loaders. Michael let out a mocking chuckle, kicking a stone on the ground. 10 years, and you could only make it to loader foreman. It really is genetics. He spoke as if his failure was my fault. And you, I asked him, how did the American dream go? His face darkened. He avoided my gaze. Don't talk about that. The Americans are scammers. Society is unfair. They just played me dirty. If I had capital, yeah, if you had given me capital 10 years ago, I'd be a millionaire now. Because of you, because you have no money, I'm suffering like this. I squeezed my fist hidden behind my back. He was still blaming others. He still wouldn't admit his incompetence. Well, come in. I pointed toward the warehouse. Mr. Miller said you need work. We're short on people to load dirt sacks here. The pay is low, but there's a place to sleep. Michael looked at the 100-pound sacks, his face scrunched up as if he were going to cry. Load sacks. Are you kidding me? I'm coming from the States. I know English. Why do I have to do this manual labor? Because you're hungry, Michael, I said bluntly, and because you don't have a single cent in your pocket. Do you work or do you fast? He grit his teeth, looking at his empty stomach. Fine, just for a few days. When I recover, I'll look for something at my level. I don't plan to rot in this miserable shop like you. Whatever you say. I turned around, hiding a cold smile. Follow me. I took Michael to the collective dorms for temporary workers. It was a row of tin shacks, boiling with heat. I pointed to a rusty metal bunk bed. That's your bed. Michael threw the plastic bag on the bed, kicking up a cloud of dust. He coughed loudly. Gross. Do you live here? No, I live in the back warehouse. I lied. In reality, tonight I would drive my Raptor to my mansion with air conditioning. I would eat a steak and drink red wine. But he didn't need to know that. The next morning, Michael started working. I was in the glass office watching through the security cameras. He worked like a sloth. He would load one sack and rest for 10 minutes. He worked and cursed at the same time. He argued with the foreman. Hey, superstar. The foreman's voice echoed over the loudspeaker. Move your hands. If you keep this up, you're not eating dinner today. Michael threw the sack to the ground, his face red with rage. Don't give me orders. I'm the son of... He was going to say, the son of David. But he remembered his father was also just an old pawn there. He swallowed his words. I'm tired. At noon, I went down to the workers' cafeteria. On purpose, I brought a humble lunchbox, white rice and black beans. I sat in a secluded corner. Michael walked in soaked in sweat with a dirty face. He took his ration. He looked at the tray of food with disgust and walked toward my table. He slumped down in front of me without even saying hello. Around us, the workers started whispering. Most of them were old-timers. They knew who I was. I had ordered them not to open their mouths, but their looks toward Michael were a mix of curiosity and amusement. What are you looking at? Michael yelled at the workers. Haven't you ever seen someone coming from the north? Then he turned toward me, poking the beans with a spoon. Have you eaten this garbage for 10 years? No wonder you're wasting away. Having something to eat is already good, son. I put a bite of rice in my mouth. So how long do you plan to work here? A few weeks, he said confidently. I have a big plan. I know a friend in Chicago. He invited me to sell electronics. I just need to save enough for the fair, and I'm out of here. This shop... He looked around, making a face. Is big, but full of country bumpkins. Hey, Dad, who is the mysterious owner of this place. Why is his face never seen? My heart pounded. He's very busy. He travels abroad all the time. Why? Michael laughed with contempt, his voice full of resentment. He's probably just another fat bald guy living like a king on your sweat and mine. Damn exploitative capitalists. You're very stupid for having worked for him your whole life. If I were you, I would have stolen some glaze formulas and opened my own shop long ago. You're too cowardly, too honest. That's why you're poor. I stopped chewing. His words were like a razor cutting my heart again. He wasn't just lazy. He also had the mindset of a thief and a traitor. Stealing is a sin, Michael, I said in a low voice. A sin... He laughed out loud, slamming the table, making the workers next to us jump. Oh, Dad, wake up. In these times, the one with fast hands wins. Honest people like you only eat scraps. You're a holy idiot." He spoke so loud that the whole cafeteria went silent. All eyes were fixed on us. An old worker, Mark, stood up suddenly, about to jump in. "Hey, brat, is that how you talk to your father? Don't you know he is—" "Mark!" I yelled, glaring at him. "Sit down." Mark stopped looking at me with concern and then sat down, grumbling and cursing under his breath. Michael didn't notice anything strange. He thought Mark was just a busybody old man. He kept laughing and pushed his tray toward me. "Here, I can't swallow this. You eat it so it doesn't go to waste. I'm going out for a smoke to forget this smell of poverty." He stood up, brushed off his butt, and walked out arrogantly, leaving me sitting there with the scraps in total humiliation in front of hundreds of my employees. I watched his back as he walked away. My patience had run out. "You mock my poverty. You want to get rich fast. You want to be the boss?" I thought, crushing the plastic cup in my hand. "Fine, Michael. I'm going to make you the boss. I'm going to hand you this entire empire along with all the gifts that come with it. Let's see if you can still laugh then." I stood up, took out my phone, and dialed the lawyer's number. "Hello, Smith. Prepare the papers. I want to appoint a new CEO immediately." Michael had been working at the shop for a week. Calling it working is an exaggeration. He was more like enduring the shop. He arrived late, left early, and spent most of his time hidden in the bathroom, looking at his phone, even though the signal there was terrible. But what hurt me most wasn't his laziness. Laziness can be cured with the whip or hunger. The worst part was his arrogant ignorance. On Monday morning, I was sweeping in the handcrafting area considered the sanctuary of imperial ceramics. This is where the masters sit to paint every stroke on the raw ceramic. The atmosphere here is always silent and solemn like a church. Michael walked in casually, chewing gum loudly. He was supposed to deliver clay, but instead of placing it carefully, he threw the package to the floor right next to Master Matthew's table. Matthew is a living treasure of the city. He is 80 years old. His hands shake when holding a spoon to eat, but when he holds the brush, his hand is as still as a lake in autumn. He was painting an extremely complex feather design on a giant vase commissioned for the State House. "Hey, old man," Michael called out, his voice booming and breaking the silence. "What are you painting that's taking so long since this morning you've only done a tiny bit?" Master Matthew didn't look up. He was holding his breath to trace a long line. Michael, seeing he was being ignored, walked over and leaned in to see the vase. "How boring," he declared. "Is painting squiggles like worms called art? In the States, they use 3D printers. In an instant, they pump out 10 vases, all identical. But sitting around coloring like kindergarten kids, when are you going to get rich?" The whole crafting room went dead silent. The young apprentices stopped and looked at him with fury. Insulting a master here is like blaspheming against a priest in church. Master Matthew put down his brush slowly. He took off his reading glasses and lifted his cloudy eyes to look at Michael. "Young man," his voice was shaky but majestic, "machines can make the shell, but they can't make the soul. You see worms because your mind only crawls on the ground." Michael laughed with contempt and patted the old man on the shoulder. "Chill out, Grandpa. This is the era of speed. Time is money. You paint this vase in a month, and how much do you sell it for? $50. I was in the corner of the room, gripping the broom handle until my knuckles turned white. My blood was boiling. He wasn't just insulting Matthew. He was insulting the craft that had fed this family for generations. Master Matthew didn't say anything else. He just shook his head and sighed. "Poor devil." And he went back to work. Michael snorted. He turned to leave and kicked a lump of clay under his feet. As he passed me, he curled his lips. "See, Dad, this whole shop is full of old-fashioned people. No wonder you're still poor." I watched his back as he left, my heart cold. "You're right, Michael. I'm poor. But my poverty is in my pocket while your poverty is in your head. And that kind of poverty, there is no medicine to cure it." At that moment, the phone in my pocket vibrated. A message from Lawyer Smith. "All procedures are ready. The papers are prepared for the ceremony." I put the phone away and looked toward Master Matthew. I would have to apologize to him later. For now, the play must go on. Friday afternoon. I found Michael sneaking a smoke behind a pile of wooden pallets. "Michael," I called out. He jumped. He quickly hid the cigarette behind his back. But seeing it was me, he put it back in his mouth and took a long drag with indifference. "What's up, old man? Coming to ask for money again? I'm telling you, I haven't been paid yet." I took a gold-colored invitation card from my pocket printed on thick luxury paper. "No, I found this." Michael took the card and squinted to read. "Gala for the anniversary of Imperial Ceramics. Cocktail and dance. Formal attire required." He read out loud and laughed mockingly. "Does this dumpy shop also do galas? I bet it's cheap sandwiches and draft beer, right?" "They say it's going to be a big party," I said, faking desire. "Mr. Miller says tonight the boss is coming in person. All employees are invited. There will be lobster French red wine, and they say they're going to raffle off a motorcycle." Michael's eyes lit up when he heard French red wine and motorcycle. "Seriously?" He licked his lips. "Sounds good. It's been a long time since I've had good booze. In the States, I only drank cheap canned beer." He stood up and brushed the dust off his pants. "But, damn, I don't have a suit. Am I really going to go in these rags to the party?" I looked at him, mocking him in silence. "I saw they sell cheap suits at the thrift store. Ask for an advance on your pay." Michael clicked his tongue, but the thirst for alcohol and the vanity of wanting to show off to the locals won out. He ran to find the foreman to ask for money. That night I stood in front of the mirror in the secret dressing room of the director's office. I took off the stinking worker's clothes and showered. The hot water washed away the coal dust and also the patience I had held for 10 years. I put on a white silk shirt. I buttoned the solid gold cufflinks. I put on a midnight blue suit, custom made in Italy. I combed my white hair back and sprayed on some warm sandalwood perfume. In the mirror, Robert the Pawn was gone. In the mirror was the boss. I looked at the clock. 7 p.m. "It's showtime, son," I told my reflection. Down in the shop courtyard, which had been cleaned and splendidly decorated with thousands of lights, Michael was walking in. He was wearing a shiny plum red suit bought from the thrift store. It was huge on the shoulders, but tight on the belly. Around his neck was a bright yellow tie. He looked like a colorful parrot in the middle of a flock of crows. He walked with arrogance, a free glass of wine in his hand, looking everywhere, searching for an opportunity to impress people. He didn't know he was walking into the slaughterhouse. Before going on stage, I had a brief meeting with lawyer Smith in the office. Smith is a good lawyer, but a coward. He wiped the sweat from his forehead constantly. His hands shook while he organized the thick pile of documents on the table. "Mr. David, I must warn you one last time," Smith said in a worried voice. "What we are about to do is technically legal, but it is very cruel. You are about to transfer the power of legal representative of the subsidiary Mud and Debt, Inc. to your son. Correct?" I nodded, lighting a cigar. "But you know well that this subsidiary carries a tax debt of $5 million and is being investigated by the IRS. Smith swallowed hard. "As soon as young Michael signs, he will assume total criminal responsibility. If he doesn't pay the debt in 30 days, he could be prosecuted for fraud and tax evasion. The penalty is 5 to 15 years. Do you really want to put your son in jail?" I took a drag of the cigar, letting the smoke out slowly toward the ceiling. "I'm not going to put him in jail, Smith. I'm teaching him to be responsible." I stood up and walked to the window, looking at Michael, who was flirting with a female worker down at the party. All his life, every time he had trouble, he ran away. He dropped out of school. He left home. He went to the States. He always thinks failure is someone else's fault. The circumstances, this poor father. I turned to look at Smith with a cold gaze. Today I will give him what he wants. Power titles being the boss. But power always comes with a price. If he is smart and humble, he will read the contract. If he is greedy, then that will be his lesson. "But what if he reads it?" Smith asked. I smiled slightly. "He won't read it. Greed blinds people, lawyer. A hungry man who sees a painted cake swallows it immediately without caring if there's a hook inside." "Fine," Smith sighed, closing his briefcase. "The files are ready. Full power of attorney. Transfer of the title of CEO and legal representative. All it takes is one signature. Good." I adjusted my shirt collar. Let's go. Let's not keep the future CEO waiting. The shop courtyard area had been transformed into a five-star gala. Round tables with flawless white tablecloths, flickering candles, a band playing a cheerful song. More than 300 employees and guests were eating and drinking happily. I watched Michael from the darkness backstage. He was drunk. His face was red, his tie was crooked. He was standing in the middle of a group of loaders, the same ones he looked down on in the morning. "I'm telling you," Michael yelled, waving his glass and spilling wine, "if this shop fell into my hands, I'd fire all these useless old men. I'd bring machines from Germany. I'd make this place a gold mine." "And what would happen to your dad?" a worker asked sarcastically. "Mr. David, that old guy—" Michael laughed out loud. "I'll retire him, or I'll make him the doorman. He's only good for sweeping trash." I heard every word. My heart didn't hurt anymore. It was numb. The last drop of compassion had evaporated with his drunkenness. The stage lights went out. The music stopped suddenly. A spotlight lit up the microphone on the high podium. The announcer with a powerful voice spoke. "Ladies and gentlemen, please, a round of applause for the founder, the heart and soul of Imperial Ceramics, President David." The large door swung wide open. I stepped out. The applause exploded like thunder. The workers stood up, chanting my name. They respected me not because I was rich, but because I had kneaded mud with them for 10 years. I walked slowly with dignity. The dark blue suit fit my figure, radiating an authority that dominated everything. I didn't look at anyone. I looked directly at the crowd where Michael was, and I saw that moment. The moment the wine glass in Michael's hand fell to the floor. Crash. The red wine splashed on his cheap imitation leather shoes. His mouth hung wide open, his eyes bugged out, almost popping from their sockets. He looked at me as if he were seeing a ghost. He rubbed his eyes and looked again. He saw his pawn dad standing at the top, acclaimed by everyone like a king. I took the microphone. My deep but powerful voice echoed through the entire space. "Thank you all. 10 years ago I started here with empty hands and a broken heart. They called me a failure. A failure." I paused, my gaze fixed on Michael. He was shaking. His face was drained of blood. "But mud doesn't know how to lie," I continued. "Only people lie. Today I am here to celebrate the truth and to keep a promise." I saw Michael start to back away. He was afraid. He thought I was going to expose him, that I was going to kick him out in front of everyone. But no, taking revenge like that is too vulgar. I smiled. The fakest kind smile I had ever acted. And today I have a special gift, a joy I have waited for 10 years. My son Michael has returned from the United States. The crowd gasped. "Oh," turning to look at Michael. "Michael," I called out, waving my hand. "Come up here with Dad, son." Michael stayed frozen on the spot. He was totally confused. He didn't understand what was happening. Why wasn't Dad yelling at him? Why was he calling him up? But then the survival instinct, or rather the greed instinct, woke up in him. He looked at my luxury suit. He looked at the bright lights. He saw the wealth he had always desired. My dad is the president. My dad is a millionaire. That thought crossed his brain fast as lightning, burning away all shame, all dignity. His face transformed in an instant. From fear it turned to surprise, and then to a radiant smile so fake it made me nauseous. "Dad!" he yelled. He pushed through the crowd, running toward the stage. He forgot that a moment ago he was calling me an old street sweeper. Now I was his greatest progenitor. He lunged and hugged me. The smell of cheap alcohol and pungent perfume hit my nose. "Dad, my God, I didn't expect it." He whispered in my ear, his voice trembling with emotion. "You hid it so well. I knew it. I knew our blood is dragon blood." But I patted him on the back, looking at the crowd that was clapping emotionally. They thought it was a father-son reunion full of tears. "Sorry for putting you to the test, Michael," I said to the microphone, but the words were for the trap. "I wanted to know if you could handle suffering, and you have worked hard all week." Michael let go of me, nodding frantically, acting his heart out. Yes, yes, Dad. I understand. A wonderful lesson. I love that work. Liar. Ladies and gentlemen, I declared firmly, I am already old. These hands are tired. This empire needs young blood. Someone with a modern vision like my son here, who has gone to the States and learned many things. Michael puffed out his chest, adjusting his crooked tie. He was crazy with happiness. He was already imagining himself sitting in that soft leather chair, giving orders left and right. That's why right here and now, I signaled to Lawyer Smith. Smith came out bringing a small table and the stack of destiny documents. I declare that I transfer the position of CEO and all executive power of the company to my son Michael. The whole hall exploded in applause. Confetti shot into the air. The music played joyfully. Michael looked at the stack of documents. His eyes shone like car headlights. He didn't see what that thick bundle of papers was. He only saw the entry ticket to the upper class. Sign, son. I handed him the gold-plated fountain pen. Sign here, and everything will be yours. Power, money, fame. Lawyer Smith opened the last page. His hand shook a little. Mr. Michael, do you want to read the clauses about obligations? Smith asked, a last and weak effort of his conscience. Michael snatched the pen from him. Read what? He laughed loud with a tone of superiority. He's my dad. I trust my dad absolutely. Lawyers always complicate everything. He leaned over. The tip of the pen touched the paper. The black ink spread, forming the name Michael with strokes full of pride. He signed once, twice, 3 times. He signed accepting the position of CEO. He signed accepting the power of legal representative. And most importantly, he signed the deed. He accepts all outstanding financial and legal obligations of the company. Done. Michael put the pen down, raising both arms to the sky like a champion who just scored the winning goal. I'm the boss. I looked at that signature. The ink was already dry. The trap had closed. I took the pen back and put it away carefully in my pocket. I looked at Michael immersed in the drunkenness of victory, waving to the crowd below. Congratulations, Mr. Director, I said in a low voice, but loud enough for him to hear. I hope you know how to swim well, because you just jumped into a shark tank. Michael turned toward me, smiling from ear to ear, not listening at all to the threat in my words. What did you say, Dad? Oh, never mind. Turn up the music. Tonight we drink until we die. Everything is on me. I stepped back, giving him the stage. The bright lights illuminated him, dazzling him. He didn't see the darkness swirling right under his feet. Tomorrow, only tomorrow morning, when the booze wears off, the real nightmare will begin. The next morning, I was sitting in the president's office drinking a cup of black coffee without sugar. The tempered glass window overlooked the entire factory complex. Everything was still running smoothly. Trucks coming and going, chimneys letting out white smoke, workers moving like busy ants. But today the atmosphere was different, a terrifying calm before the storm. 10 a.m. The office door flew open without anyone knocking. Michael walked in. He was still wearing the plum-red suit from last night, but now it was wrinkled, stained with dried wine, and smelled like cold tobacco. His face was swollen from the hangover, his eyes red, but his walk was still as arrogant as a crab's. "Good morning, ex-president," he yelled with a raspy voice. He threw the briefcase of papers he had just taken without permission from the secretary's desk onto my mahogany table. "Why are you still sitting in my chair?" I put down the coffee cup, looking at him calmly. "This chair is very comfortable, Michael. I've been sitting here for 10 years. My butt is already used to it." "Well, practice standing up." Michael laughed with contempt, walking around the desk, stroking the expensive decorations. "Last night was great. I promised to double the pay for all employees. See how generous I am. That's the style of modern leadership." I arched an eyebrow. "Double the pay? Where are you going to get the money?" "From the company's money, obviously." He patted his breast pocket where he kept the gold pen from last night. "By the way, I came to talk seriously. You're old. It's only fair that you retire. I already saw a villa in the suburbs. Go out there and grow vegetables. And this office, he wrinkled his nose. I'm going to demolish it and build it again. The smell of old is too strong. Are you firing me? I asked without emotion in my voice. I'm not firing you, it's a personnel restructuring. Michael let out a loud laugh, leaning against the bookshelf. Besides, I don't think you're good as an advisor. Your mindset is very old-fashioned. It's best that you take your monthly pension and go on a trip. Where will it be? A nursing home, maybe. His insolence had reached the limit. He really believed he had the power of life and death in his hands. He believed that the signature from last night was a master key that opened the treasure. Fine, Mr. CEO. I stood up slowly, buttoning my jacket. If the gentleman wants to work immediately, I invite you to conference room number 1. The board of directors and the legal team are waiting for you for the asset handover. Michael's eyes shone like headlights. Assets. The bank accounts, right? Let's go. I'm dying to see how many millions of dollars you have in there. He shot out the door, leaving me behind. I looked at his back and shook my head slightly. You're about to see it, son, but it's not millions of dollars in cash. Conference room number 1 was freezing. The air conditioning was at 64 degrees, but the atmosphere felt even colder. Sitting around the long oval table were 5 men in black suits with serious faces, as if they were at a funeral. They were Smith, the lawyer, the chief accountant, and 3 independent auditors I specifically hired for this theater. Michael walked in, throwing his arms wide like a rock star. Hello, gentlemen. Sorry for the delay. That's the life of the boss. Too much work. He pulled out the main chair at the head of the table, slumped down, and put his feet up on the table. Okay, where's the money? Give me the account number so I can transfer some for my expenses. No one laughed. No one clapped. Smith adjusted his glasses, looking at Michael with a mix of pity and fear. He looked at me standing, leaning against the door, and cleared his throat. Mr. Michael, before handing over financial control, we need to complete the handover of, obligations. Obligations or whatever? Michael waved his hand. I signed everything last night. Last night I signed until my hand hurt. Now give me the money. The chief accountant pushed a thick folder toward Michael. Mr. CEO, this is the most recent financial report of the legal entity you just received last night. Mud and Debt, Inc. Michael frowned, taking his feet down. Mud and... What? The name of the company is Imperial Ceramics, right? Why such a weird name? Ah, Smith explained with a monotonous voice like a machine. Imperial Ceramics is the commercial brand, but the legal entity that owns it was restructured yesterday. Mr. David split the company into 2 parts. Part 1 assets, factory machinery brand, and cash. This part belongs to the David Trust, with Mr. David as the lifetime holder. Part 2, outstanding debts, unpaid tax obligations, and risky contracts. This part was consolidated into the company Mud and Debt, Inc. Michael blinked. His lazy brain was trying to process the information. Split. What does that mean? It means... Smith turned the page of the file, pointing to Michael's still fresh signature. Last night you signed accepting the position of CEO and sole legal representative of the company Mud and Debt, Inc. So what does this company have? Michael's voice started to tremble. It has... The chief accountant read out loud. An old, dilapidated warehouse in the suburbs where you slept on the first day. 3 broken-down trucks with expired registrations and... He stopped, turning to a page with a bright red stamp. And a debt of income tax of $3 million, plus a late payment penalty of $2 million. In total, it is $5 million. The room fell into absolute silence. Only the hum of the projector could be heard. Michael stayed petrified. His face went from the red of the wine to the pale white of a corpse. $5 million, he stammered. Are you kidding me? Where is the money in the bank? In the account of Mud and Debt, currently there is... The accountant typed on the computer. Exactly $20. Enough to pay for your cab home. Fraud! Michael screamed, jumping up and knocking over the chair. He slammed his hand on the table. This is fraud. You all conspired to cheat me. Dad. He turned toward me, his eyes bulging with fury. You played me dirty. You said you were giving me the company. I walked slowly toward the board table, took out a cigar, and lit it. I gave it to you. I gave you the legal personality. I gave you the title. You wanted to be the boss. Right? The boss is the first one to be responsible when there are problems. Or did you think being the boss was just sitting around counting money? But I didn't know there was debt? Michael howled. I didn't read. Smith repeated his words coldly. Before a court, that sentence has no value, young Michael. The signature is yours. You confirm that you understand and accept the entire financial state of the company. Smith pulled out another paper with the IRS logo. And the bad news doesn't end there. This morning the IRS just sent a summons. Since Mud and Debt has a 6-month delay in paying taxes, and you are the new legal representative, they demand you show up. If you don't pay the full $5 million in 30 days, Smith paused, looking directly into Michael's eyes, you will be prosecuted for tax fraud and fraudulent administration. The penalty for this amount is 10 to 15 years in prison. No bail. Michael staggered. He had to hold on to the edge of the table to keep from falling. Prison, he whispered. I just returned to the country. I don't want to go to jail. He turned toward me. All that arrogance from a moment ago had completely vanished. Only the image of the scared and cowardly boy was left. Dad, do something. You have money. Pay for me. I'm your son. I took a drag of the cigar and blew the smoke in his face. My son. I smiled with contempt. Yesterday you said I was a senile old man who needed to go to a nursing home. Today, I'm your dad again. Sorry I was drunk. I talked pure nonsense. Michael lunged to grab my hands with tears and snot running down. Dad, save me. $5 million for you is nothing. Help me pay. I pushed his hand away hard, making him fall flat on his face on the floor. True $5 million for me is a small thing. I earn that amount in a month. But I earn it with sweat, with dirt, with fire. And you, what do you plan to pay me with your miserable life? Michael lay on the floor, on the expensive wool carpet of the conference room. He was crying. The crying sounded like a whipped child, but much more cowardly. Damn it! He slammed the floor with his fist. Why are you doing this to me? Do you hate me that much? I crouched down in front of him, looking directly into those swollen eyes. I don't hate you. I hate the cowardice that is in you. I grabbed the lapel of his plum-red suit. That cheap suit, he thought, was an imperial robe. You went to the States for 10 years. What did you learn? You learned to look down on your origins. You learned to look down on work. You learned to blame others. You come back here, you see this heritage, and you don't ask how much I suffered to build it. You only ask where the money is. Michael stammered without words. You called me a failure, I growled. Fine. Now look, who is the failure? You owe $5 million. You're going to jail, and you don't have a cent in your pocket. You're a zero, Michael. Worse than a zero. You're a negative number. Michael cowered. He realized that the man in front of him wasn't the easy-to-intimidate old father. He was a monster forged in the fire of the kiln. What do you want? He asked in a low voice. Do you want me to die? No. Dying is too easy. I stood up, brushing the dust off my pants. I want you to live, but to live like a man. I turned toward Smith. Have you drafted the rescue contract yet? Smith nodded, pulling out a last document. It was thinner, only a few pages, but the content weighed tons. Give it to him. Smith put the paper in front of Michael. Young Michael, Mr. David offers to buy your tax debt. He will pay the $5 million to the IRS immediately so you don't go to prison. Michael's eyes lit up with hope. Really? Thank you, Dad. I knew you loved me. Don't celebrate yet, Smith interrupted. In exchange, you must sign this debt payment labor contract. What contract? Michael took the paper and read. The content is as follows. You acknowledge owing Mr. David $5 million. You will work at the Imperial Ceramics Factory to pay off the debt. Your salary will be the local minimum wage. 80% of the salary will be deducted directly from the principal debt. You will only be allowed to keep 20% for food. You will start from the lowest position. Janitorial staff and raw clay processing. Duration of the contract indefinite until the total debt is paid. Calculating about 80 years. If you run away or quit, the tax fraud file will be reactivated and sent directly to court. After reading, Michael's hand shook so much that he dropped the paper. 80 years, he screamed. This is my slavery. Do you plan to make me a slave? It's not slavery, it's being an honest worker, I replied coldly. You have two options. One, walk out that door, wait for the police to come handcuff you, and spend 15 years in jail with the thugs. I've heard in jail they love lazy pretty boys like you. 2, sign here, take off that clown suit, put on the worker's uniform, and go clean the latrines. I looked at my watch. You have 5 minutes to think. After 5 minutes, I call the police. Those 5 minutes were long as a century. Michael sat on the floor, sweating buckets. He looked toward the window where freedom was calling, but also where the police would be waiting. Then he looked at me. He was looking for a little compassion in my eyes, but he only saw the firmness of a rock. 1 minute left, Smith reminded him with the phone already in his hand. Michael grit his teeth. He knew he had lost. Lost completely. He had no way out. The dream of being the boss, the dream of being a millionaire, everything had vanished in smoke. Now he was only a debtor. Give me the pen, he said with a voice full of resentment. He signed the contract. This time his hand shook. The signature came out crooked ugly, no longer as elegant as last night. As soon as he let go of the pen, I signaled the guard. Mark. The old guard. Mark walked in, bringing a gray worker's uniform, old and worn, and a pair of rubber boots. Take it off, I ordered Michael. Right here. Michael's eyes went wide. Right now. That suit you bought with a salary advance. You haven't worked an hour yet, so you have no money to pay for it. I'm confiscating it. Michael stood up slowly, taking off the plum-red jacket. Then he took off the tie, then the white shirt. He stood there half-naked, shivering from the cold and the humiliation. In front of the other men, he put on the worker's uniform. The rough fabric rubbed against his rich kid skin, annoying him. He stepped his feet into the heavy rubber boots. I walked over and adjusted his shirt collar. For the first time in 10 years, I was touching my son in such a close way. You look better in this sun, I said in a low voice. Welcome to the Imperial Ceramics team. I hate you, Michael hissed through his teeth. His eyes looked at me with pure hatred. Good. I nodded. Keep that hatred. Turn it into strength to pick up dirt. When you run out of hatred, or when you pay off all the debt, you will be free. I turned toward Mark. Take him to the wastewater treatment plant. Today the sedimentation tank is clogged. Let him unclog it until it's clean. Mark nodded, grabbing Michael by the arm to take him away. Let's go, young boss. There's a lot of work. Michael was dragged away, dragging his rubber boots noisily on the granite floor. He turned to look at me one last time. That look was no longer the contempt of someone superior. It was the look of a wild beast that had just fallen into a trap and been caged. The door closed. The room went silent. Smith picked up the papers, sighing with relief. That was very hard, Mr. David. Do you think he'll last? I walked toward the window, looking out at the courtyard. A moment later, I saw the small figure of Michael in his gray suit, walking with his head down after Mark toward the most ruined area of the factory. Clay to become precious ceramic has to go through fire at 1200 degrees Smith, I said, lowering my voice. If it breaks, it's trash. But if it lasts, it will become a masterpiece. I took the already cold cup of coffee and drank it in one gulp. It tasted bitter. But after the bitterness, I started to feel a light sweetness. The human firing process had begun. If hell had a smell, I bet it would smell like the ammonia, rising from the raw glaze tanks mixed with the sour sweat of the kiln workers at noon in the summer. And Michael, my former prince, was wallowing in that hell. The first week was the worst. Michael couldn't do the work. He was weak. Carrying a 100-pound sack of clay 10 steps and his legs shook. Then he would fall to the ground. The sack would crush him. The dust would fly everywhere. The workers laughed out loud. Go on, princess, they yelled at him. Careful, don't break a nail. Michael lay there coughing with his face red with anger and shame. He looked toward my glass office with pleading eyes, but I was just standing there, coffee cup in hand, looking down coldly like a god who rules over hell. I didn't move. Rules are rules. The first month, his rich kid fingers started to bleed. His skin was thin. Touching the rough sacks and the wooden shovel handles, he would get blisters. The blisters would burst, letting out yellow liquid. Then they would scab, and burst again. Every night he dragged himself to his collective dorm, his hands shaking so much he couldn't hold the spoon to eat. He cried. I heard Mark report that he cried sobbing all night long, cursing me, cursing the states, cursing his destiny. Damned old man, he wants to kill me. But he didn't dare to run away. The fear of prison and the thugs in jail was bigger than the fear of hard labor. By the third month, resistance started to turn into resignation. Michael didn't curse anymore. He was too tired to curse. He became a machine. He woke up at 5, swept the shop, unclogged pipes, mixed dirt-loaded sacks. And at night, he fell dead asleep. One afternoon, I went to inspect the shop. I saw Michael wresting drinking water from the public tap he used to look down on for being dirty. He drank with desperation like a thirsty camel. I walked over. He wiped his mouth with the dirty sleeve of his shirt and looked up at me. His gaze had changed. That arrogant and evasive look from before had vanished. In its place was a cloudy, tired look, but with something more real. Are you not dead yet? I asked. No, he replied dryly, but almost. Good, I nodded. What doesn't kill you makes you harder. Show me your hands. He hesitated and then held out his hands. They were no longer Michael Jr.'s hands. The palms were full of yellowish calluses, the nails black from embedded clay, impossible to wash. Manly hands, I declared. Now you are starting to look like a David. Keep working. I turned around, hiding a half smile. His shell of false appearance was falling to pieces. The human part inside was showing up. Second year of the slavery contract. Michael had paid off about 15% of the debt. He was promoted from janitorial to assistant in the kiln area. The work was less dirty but hotter. He had to watch the fire. A small mistake in the temperature would ruin a batch worth thousands of dollars. One night of torrential rain, I received a notice from the guard. There was a strange car parked at the back door. It was the car of Mr. Eli, my biggest competitor in this region. Eli had always coveted my exclusive deep cobalt blue glaze formula. I turned off the office lights, watching silently through the camera. Eli was out in the rain, holding an umbrella for Michael. The two were whispering. Listen, kid, Eli said with a sweet voice. I know your father treats you like a mangy dog. 80 years to pay crazy. I have an offer. Michael was cowering in his soaked uniform. His eyes flashed at the word offer. What do you want? The blue formula, Eli said directly. You work at the kilns. You know where that notebook is kept. Get it for me. I'll pay your entire debt. Plus $1 million in cash. And I'll take you to Canada this very night. Freedom, wealth, revenge on that stingy old man. My heart shrank. This was the final test. If he accepted, I would put him in jail for real. No more salvation. Michael stayed silent. The rain beat against his face. He looked at Eli's shiny Mercedes, and then he looked at the old pottery play shop behind him. $1 million. Freedom. That was all he had dreamed of. What do you say? Eli urged. Opportunity only comes once. Michael wiped his face with his hand. He looked at his calloused hands, the hands that had kneaded tons of dirt in the last 2 years. Hey, Mr. Eli, Michael said with a raspy voice. Tell me, sir, do you know why my dad's glaze is so blue? Eli was perplexed. Why, because my dad mixes sweat into it, Michael replied, and also blood. He took a step back, moving away from Eli's umbrella. I'm a failure. I'm a prisoner of hard labor, but I'm not a thief. Are you crazy? Eli yelled. Do you plan to be a slave your whole life? Get out! Michael spat on the ground right next to Eli's expensive shoes. Get out of my father's land before I call security." Eli cursed and got in his car to speed away. In the dark office, I slumped into the chair. Tears welled up in my eyes. For the first time in 12 years, I cried. Not from sadness, but from relief. My son had returned. Not from the States, but from the world of ignorance. Fourth year. Michael no longer owed me money. In fact, I had secretly forgiven his debt since that rainy night, but I didn't tell him. I wanted to see how far he would go. Now he was a true potter. Marked muscles, tan skin, copper-colored. He spoke little, he was reserved. But when he sat at the wheel, he transformed into an artist. He loved the earth. I saw how he stroked the clay. He talked to the earth like I used to. "Behave. Don't crack. I'm going to make you beautiful." One morning he walked into my office, without knocking, but this time not with insolence, but with the security of a master artisan. In his hands he brought a vase. He put the vase on my table. It was a tall and elegant jar. Ivory glaze with thorny cacti painted by hand, rising in the middle of the desert. The blue color of the glaze was deep captivating. "To deduct from this month's debt," he said with a calm voice. I took the vase. I examined it under the sunlight. I gently tapped the rim with my nail. Ting! Crystal clear sound without impurities. Perfect technique. Even I had to admit, in my heart, his strokes were freer than mine. He had the strength of youth. But I am David. I don't praise so easily. Here on the neck, I pointed to a tiny point almost invisible to the naked eye. The glaze is a bit thick. The kiln temperature varied 5 degrees right. Michael nodded. Yes. The wind changed direction at 3 a.m. I tried to adjust the kiln, but I was a few seconds late. It doesn't meet the export standard. I pushed the vase toward him. "Break it. Do it again." I waited for him to get angry. I waited for the old Michael to scream, "Exacting old man, it's very pretty like this." But no. Michael took the vase. He looked at his work for a second with regret, and then without hesitation he lifted it and threw it hard to the floor. Crash! The vase shattered. The beautiful ceramic shards flew everywhere. "Yes, master." He bowed his head to me, and he turned toward the door. "I'll make a better one." I looked at the pieces on the floor. My heart vibrated with pride, breaking the ego to pursue perfection. That was the last lesson. He had graduated. A week later, I had a slight heart attack. The doctor said my heart was overloaded. I knew I didn't have much time left. I called Michael and Lawyer Smith to the office. Michael walked in still in his work clothes, full of dirt. He looked at me with concern as I lay on the sofa. "How are you, Dad?" he asked with genuine anxiety. "About to die." I smiled with irony. "But I won't die right now. Sit down." Smith unfolded a new file. This time it wasn't a debt trap. "Michael," I said with a weak voice, "you already paid off your entire monetary debt. The $5 million. You finished paying it last year." Michael was stunned. "Why didn't you tell me? I've worked for free all this year to see if you truly loved the craft, or if you only did it for fear of jail." I interrupted him. "And you have proven it." I signaled to Smith. The lawyer handed Michael a will and a trust contract. "Today I'm handing you the company. This time it's for real." Michael took the paper. His hands shook. But he didn't rush to sign like the previous time. He read. He read line by line. He analyzed every word. "David Heritage Trust." He read out loud. "Michael David is named Life Executive Director." "Keep reading," I reminded him. "On the condition he can't sell the brand. He cannot fire artisans over 60 years old. He must allocate 30% of the annual profits to reinvest in the pottery school for poor children. If he violates any clause, all assets will automatically transfer to the Church of the Diocese." Michael looked up at me. "Dad, do you still not trust me completely? Do you not give me ownership of the land?" "I don't give you ownership. I give you responsibility." I looked him straight in the eyes. "Assets are things that can be sold, but legacy is something that must be kept. You are not the owner of this land, Michael. You are its employee. You are the guardian of the fire. And if I don't sign, he asked, then you are free. You can leave. I'll leave the company to Mark or Matthew, and you go with empty hands, but free of debt. Michael looked at the contract. Then he looked out the window, where the kiln chimneys let out smoke toward the intense blue sky. That was his world now. He had shed sweat and blood there. He took the pen. I'm not going anywhere, he said firmly. This is my home. He signed. The signature this time was bold, decisive, and full of weight. I sighed with relief, closing my eyes. Good. Now get out to work. Kiln number 3 is overheating. 3 years later, I had retired completely, sitting in my wheelchair. Every day the nurse took me out to the porch to look at the valley, but today I demanded to go down to the shop. The Imperial Ceramics shop was different now. It had expanded. It was more modern, but the soul was still the same. The old artisans were still respected, and the young ones worked with enthusiasm. I saw Michael standing in the middle of the courtyard. He was wearing a rustic fabric shirt with sleeves rolled up showing his muscular arms. He was scolding a truck driver for shaking a box of merchandise. Damn it! He yelled with a booming voice just like mine in my time. Are you carrying ceramics or sacks of potatoes? One crack and I deduct it from your pay. Work right. The driver bowed his head, apologizing profusely. Michael turned around and saw I was in the wheelchair. He smiled. A radiant smile, white teeth shining in his sun-tanned face. He walked over, wiped his hands full of mud on his pants before daring to take my hand. Hey, boss, he said. Coming to inspect me. Coming down to see if you haven't ruined my kiln. I grumbled, but my eyes shone with joy. At that moment, a luxury car parked in front of the door. A boy of about 10 years old got out. It was Michael's son, my grandson. The boy wore the uniform of an international school, clean and scented. He ran in, wanting to hug his dad. Dad? Michael quickly backed away, holding out his mud-stained hands to stop him. No, my son. Don't hug me. I'm very dirty. The boy stopped, looked at his dad's dirt-stained work clothes, and wrinkled his nose. Yo, Dad, you smell like mud. Michael froze for a second. I saw the image of himself 15 years ago pass through his eyes, the day he kicked my bucket of water. But then Michael smiled. He knelt down, looking directly into his son's eyes. He wasn't ashamed. He lifted those calloused, cracked hands full of dark brown clay in front of the boy's face. Listen, son, Michael said with a warm and proud voice. I am dirty. Yes, my hands smell like mud. Yes, but this dirt pays for the clean uniform you're wearing. This smell of mud buys your rich food every day. And these dirty hands, he squeezed his fist, they are building your future. The boy looked at his dad with wonder, and then he looked at those hands. He didn't understand everything, but he felt the strength in his father's voice. He stepped closer, ignoring the warning, and hugged Michael's neck. I'm not afraid of the dirt. Michael hugged his son, closing his eyes, inhaling the boy's scent. 2 tears rolled down his cheeks, mixing with the coal dust. I was in my wheelchair watching the scene. The evening wind blew, bringing the pungent smell of fired earth. I remembered the phrase from years ago. You are a failure. I looked at Michael, the great man, kneeling in the mud, hugging the future generation. He wasn't a stock market billionaire. He wasn't a real estate mogul. He was just a potter with calloused hands. I turned the wheelchair to leave, leaving space for father and son. The failure, I whispered to myself with one last smile of satisfaction on my lips. The failure now has dirty hands, but a full soul. You're welcome, son. If this story has captivated you, please like the video, subscribe to William's Revenge Stories, and share your thoughts in the comments. To hear the next story, click on the box to the left of the screen. Thank you for watching.